So for purposes of this talk, we're focused on legislative advocacy directed at this list of elected officials. Which officials we engage with will obviously depend on whether the issue we're concerned about is being addressed at the federal, state, or local level. Everyone in Northern Virginia has 2 U.S. senators, 1 U.S. representative, 1 state senator, 1 delegate, and 1 county supervisor. Of course, we can also advocate with the executive branch, the president, the governor, and the agencies that report to them, as well as with corporations and other organizations. And many of the same principles we'll discuss for legislative advocacy apply to other forms of advocacy as well. We'll review a number of strategies that are available for attempting to influence our elected officials, including petitions, social media messaging, letters, emails, phone calls, visits to the elected official's office, and so on. Generally speaking, the more effort a form of advocacy requires, the greater chance it has of influencing the elected official's views. But none of this is particularly difficult or something that only professional lobbyists can do. Anyone can do it. And advocacy with our elected officials is the key to getting public policies enacted that reflect the principles of Catholic social teaching: respect for human life and dignity, concern for the poor, care for creation, and so on. Elected officials work for us, and we have the right and responsibility to let them know what policies we want them to adopt. And elected officials want to know and need to know what their constituents are thinking. When it comes to interactions with constituents, elected officials care about things that make them look good, responsive, hardworking to the people of their district, or in the case of senators, their state. In practice, that means they care about some things very much and other things very little, as this chart illustrates. So take a few minutes to look this over. You'll note that the 6th line refers to concrete asks. You'll be hearing the term asks a lot in this presentation. It refers to a specific request to your elected official, for example, to co-sponsor, vote for, or vote against a particular bill identified by its name and number. But other specific asks could be to vote for or against a nominee to an executive or judicial position, or to sign on to a Dear Colleague letter about an issue, for example. Former U.S. Representative Barney Frank adds 2 other pieces of advice. First, make sure you're registered to vote in the district. He says many office holders will check this, especially for people who write them frequently. Elected officials pay as much attention to those who are not registered to vote as butchers do to the food preferences of vegetarians, unquote. Second, before contacting your elected official about an issue, try to find out if he or she has already taken a position on it. The elected official may have posted a statement on the issue on his or her website, and a Google search may reveal if the elected official has talked about it in a speech or interview. If you're advocating on a bill, checking the congress.gov website for the bill will disclose if your U.S. senator or representative was already a co-sponsor. For bills in the General Assembly, checking the Virginia Legislative Information Service website will disclose a list of co-patrons. Bills in Congress have sponsors and co-sponsors. Bills in the General Assembly have patrons and co-patrons. The terms mean the same thing. Frank says, quote, when I received letters from people urging me to vote for a bill of which I was the prominent main sponsor, I was skeptical that the writer would be watching how I voted. Even if your elected officials are already on record supporting an issue you care about, you should still contact them about the issue. It's important to thank our elected officials when they do the right thing, and they can point to constituent feedback as support for their position when others question it. But of course, you'd frame your message differently depending on whether the elected official is or is not already on board. Also, try to learn more about the elected official you're trying to influence. What issues seem to matter to them the most? What might you have in common that may help you build a relationship with them? What committees do they serve on? It's particularly helpful to know whether or not they serve on the legislative committee that has jurisdiction over the issue you're advocating about. And since it's likely you'll be contacting them again in the future, it's important to see every communication with them as relationship building. Okay, so you've decided to engage in advocacy on an issue of concern to you, and you've done some homework on the issue and on your elected officials. What strategy do you use for communicating with them? We're going to discuss these 9 strategies for trying to influence elected officials: petitions, social media messaging, such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., letters, emails, phone calls to elected officials, visits to the elected official's office, attendance at an elected official's town hall meeting, speaking at a public comment hearing, and letters to the editor. Signing a petition is an easy but generally ineffective way of influencing your elected officials. Typically, the petition is not targeted to your elected officials specifically, and signatures may not be solicited only from your district for representatives or state for the senators. Plus, the minimal effort each person makes in signing a petition means elected officials are unlikely to give it much weight. As Barney Frank explains, a goal in any advocacy is to persuade your elected official that you care enough about an issue for it to motivate your voting behavior in the next election. Simply agreeing to put your name on a list doesn't convey this. But a petition is an effective way for the sponsoring organization to expand its list of people to solicit money and more active involvement. Now, you may not mind that if you're already a member of the organization or it's one you're interested in joining. And if a well-focused petition gets major support from the public, it may attract attention from the media and then potentially even elected officials. So if a petition is on an issue you care about, the sponsoring organization is one you trust, and the position is well-focused on a specific ask, you may want to sign on. But don't stop there. Follow up with one of the other advocacy tools we're going to be discussing. Like signing a petition, sending a tweet about your elected official or posting a message on his or her Facebook page or your own takes little effort, and hence it may have little, if any, influence. But many elected officials' offices do pay attention to social media messaging. If your message is appropriately tagged to the elected official, identifies you as a constituent, and makes a specific ask, it may be worth the effort, particularly if it gains wider attention like retweets or additional Facebook comments, or adds to a trend. Use a photo, video, or other graphic to get attention, and provide a link to a site with additional information or where others can take action. But again, don't stop there. Follow up with one of the other advocacy tools we're going to be discussing. Writing a personal letter to your elected official has traditionally been regarded as one of the more effective actions you can take, in part because elected officials are aware of the greater level of effort it requires. However, some elected officials' offices much prefer email now, as much easier to handle. Regular mail is also slower, particularly at the federal level, because of both the usual mail delivery times and the additional time taken to irradiate all regular mail addressed to Congress. So if action on your issue is not needed for 2 weeks or more, a letter may get greater attention. If action is needed sooner, an email message is a better option. Some tips for letter writing include the following. Limit your letter to one issue. Be respectful and professional. Avoid spelling and grammatical errors. Handwriting your letter is better than typing it if your handwriting is legible to others. If not, typing is better. Put your address at the top so the elected official staff will see you're a constituent. Also, be succinct. State your specific ask, for example, to support or oppose a particular bill identified by its name and number, and give your main reasons in a paragraph or two. Use your own words rather than merely copying text from an advocacy organization. And then humanize your message. State briefly why the issue is important to you. For example, relating it to your personal experience or faith perspective, or how the issue affects people in the elected officials' district or state. Particularly if you need your elected officials to act on an issue within the next 2 weeks, sending an email message is one of the more effective ways of communicating with them. It's easier than sending a letter, and it allows you to present your position more fully than in a short social media message or phone call. Most of the tips for letter writing apply to email messages as well. Limit your message to one issue, be respectful and professional, be succinct, state your specific ask, and give your main reasons in a paragraph or two, use your own words, and humanize your message as we discussed with letters. A few final points about using email. Our US senators and representatives have comment forms on their websites that generate email to the elected officials. You'll be asked to enter your address, so they'll see you're a constituent without your having to say so in the text of your message. But if you're writing a state senator or delegate or a county supervisor, you'll be using your own email program, so be sure to include your address in your email so the staff will see you're a constituent. If you're writing to 2 or 3 of your elected officials about the same issue, you may want to type the text of your message in a separate Word document and then copy and paste it into the comment form on each elected official's webpage or into your own email if you're sending it to a delegate or supervisor. And this also allows you to keep a copy of what you wrote. If you cite the name and number of the Senate bill when writing to your senators, and of course change them to the name and number of the corresponding House bill when you write to your representative or a delegate. Some advocacy organizations will invite you to send standardized email messages, the electronic version of a form letter, to your elected officials from the organization's website. This makes it easy for you to send the same message to 2 or 3 elected officials simultaneously, but elected officials pay much less attention to such form letters. And of course, the organization will add you to its email list for future solicitations. So if the organization's website allows you to edit the email text to put it in your own words and to humanize the message as we've discussed, and you don't mind getting on their email list, then feel free to use that option instead of going to each elected official's website or generating your own emails. Don't overdo it with email messages, though. If you write your elected officials on a near daily basis about a raft of issues, your message will start to look like spam to the elected official staff. So focus on the issues you care most about and write when some specific action is pending or urgently needed. Phone calls are an effective way of communicating your views to your elected officials, particularly on hot button issues of the day or when a key vote is imminent. Your elected officials are already getting lots of calls on such issues, and it's important that your views get tallied along with those of other callers. Limit each call to a single issue. Before calling, decide whether you just want to register your opinion for or against some pending action, or whether you want to have a substantive discussion with the staff about it. If the issue has a high profile, such the elected official is undoubtedly very aware of the arguments, and your opinion is likely shared by many other callers, just leave a brief message either on voicemail or with whoever answers the phone. That's sufficient. Give your name, city, and zip code so it's clear you're a constituent. Say you don't need a response so they can tally your call quickly. And state your position in a single sentence, asking the elected official to support or oppose the pending action, and including the name and number of the bill if relevant. If you want to say why you hold that position, do so in just a sentence or two, but it's not really necessary to give a reason, and the staff may not even have the time to write it down. If they're being inundated with calls, they may simply note the number of pro and con messages they receive. If the issue is one on which you want to have a substantive discussion with a member of the elected official staff, you'll approach the call differently. Now, let's assume for this example that your elected official has not yet taken a position on the issue as far as you can tell from your research. So give the receptionist your name, city, and zip code so it's clear you're a constituent. State the general issue on which you're calling and ask to speak with the legislative aide who handles that issue for the elected official. If the legislative aide is available, introduce yourself to the aide, get his or her name, explain why you're calling, include your specific ask, the main reasons for your position, and why the issue is important to you or how the issue affects people in the elected officials district or in the state. And ask where the elected official stands on the issue. If the aide says that the elected officials already issued a statement on the issue, ask where you can find it or get a copy. If the elected official has not yet taken a position on the issue, offer to provide additional information if you have it, and ask when you can check back with the aide to get the elected official's response on the issue. If the receptionist says the aide is not available, and that's more likely, ask for the aide's name, which the receptionist may or may not give you, and ask to leave a message on the aide's voicemail. Then leave a voicemail message including your name and phone number and the same points as listed above your ask and so on. And then ask that the aide call you back regarding the elected official's position on the issue. If you don't hear back from the aide within a day or two, call again or send an email to the aide if you have his or her email address, obviously, following up on your previous message and asking for a call back. Once you hear back from the aide regarding the elected official's position, decide how you want to proceed. If the elected official's position is favorable, send a letter or email to the elected official thanking him or her for taking that position. If the elected official's position is unfavorable, but you think further efforts at persuasion may be worth trying, for example, the elected official's voting record on similar matters is mixed, follow up with the elected official by letter, email, or an in-person contact, responding to the elected official's position and providing reasons why the elected official should change his or her position and get others to join your effort. If the elected official's position is unfavorable and appears irreversible, then just thank the aide for getting back to you and say you look forward to working with him or her on other issues in the future. Probably the most effective way to interact with your elected officials and their staffs is by getting a group of people together to visit them in their main or district offices. You're unlikely to get a member with a US senator or representative in his or her DC office while Congress is in session, and ditto for a state senator or delegate in his or her Richmond office while the General Assembly is in session. But you may be able to meet with them in a district office when the elected official has office hours there or during the legislative recess. And you should be able to get a meeting with the elected official staff even during times when the elected official is unavailable, and that's just as valuable. Meeting with an elected official or his or her staff gives the group the opportunity to state your ask, explain the reasons in some detail, provide written information for the elected official to review after your visit, and explain why the issue is important to the members of the group or how it affects people in the elected official's district or the state. It also gives the elected official or the staff the opportunity to ask questions, particularly if members of the group have any expertise to offer on the issue. But expertise is not necessary. Elected officials need to hear their constituents' concerns and how they are affected. The Friends Committee on National Legislation suggests the following steps for a visit. Choose a topic, preferably a single issue with some specific action pending. Decide who's going, including people can bring different experiences and concerns to bear on the issue. Schedule your visit with the elected official's office. Prepare for the visit, including developing an agenda, deciding who will say what, and deciding what materials to bring, written materials. Decide who will serve as the group's chief spokesperson and who will take the notes. Here's a sample agenda for the visit. The group's chief spokesperson explains who the group is and introduces the members of the group. It's a good idea to bring a list of the group's members' names and addresses to leave with the staff. Ask how much time the elected official or staff has to meet with you. Express appreciation for some action or position the elected official has taken that relates to the group's concerns to build a little rapport. State the group's ask, for example, support or oppose a specific bill. Provide and briefly explain any written material you've brought, for example, a background paper or fact sheet. Then have a few group members share their stories, why they care about the issue, how it affects them or their community, and how the ask will affect the issue. For example, this bill will make things better and we ask you to vote for it, or the bill will make things worse and we ask you to vote against it. Ask for the elected officials or the staff's response. Does the elected official support the ask? Does he or she have questions for the group or need additional information? Repeat the ask at the end of the meeting and then thank the elected official or staff for their time and for supporting the ask if they do. Additional tips for the visit: be clear, concise, and respectful at all times. If the elected official or staff asks a question to which you don't have an immediate answer, offer to get back to the elected official or staff with the answer. And then follow up after the meeting by sending an email thanking the elected official or his or her staff for the meeting and responding to any questions left unanswered during the visit. Attendance at an elected official's town hall meeting can be another very effective way of interacting with your elected officials, but opportunities to speak are somewhat limited. Some elected officials don't hold town hall meetings, others may hold them, but you may or may not be called on depending on the attendance and the time available. It doesn't appear that either of our US senators conduct traditional town hall meetings as a normal practice, and nor does Representative Wexton. Representative Connolly holds telephone town hall meetings from time to time. The state senators and delegates are more likely to hold in-person town hall meetings. The town hall meeting format allows participants to ask questions of the elected official. If called on, you can introduce your question with a very brief statement of the issue and why you care about it, but you won't be able to share much information as you could in a visit with the elected official or his or her staff. So here are some tips about participating in an in-person or telephone town hall meeting. Find out when your elected official's next town hall meeting will be, either from his or her website or by calling the office. If the date has not been set, ask to be added to a list to receive an email notice when the next town hall meeting is scheduled. Get a group together to attend or participate in the town hall meeting, and have each person register on the elected official's website. Research your elected official's position and voting record on the issue. Then prepare a list of questions for your group to ask the elected official in light of your research. If you're attending an in-person town hall meeting, the group should get there early, spread out, and find seats near the front of the room. When the floor is open for questions, everyone in the group should raise his or her hand to be called on, or should get in a queue to ask a question in a telephone town hall meeting. In an in-person town hall meeting, look friendly and neutral to increase your chances of being called on. The first member of your group to be called on should ask the first question on your list. If the elected official doesn't give a straight answer, ask a follow-up question if possible. In an in-person town hall meeting, after that question is answered, everyone else in the group should raise his or her hand again, and whoever is called on next should ask the second question on your list, and so on. In a telephone town hall meeting, everybody will already be in the queue to ask a question. At the end of the town hall meeting, participants who weren't able to ask their question may be given an opportunity to submit them to the elected official staff for an email response later. Take advantage of that opportunity if the group has questions that were not asked during the town hall meeting. Public comment hearings are another good opportunity to influence your elected officials at the state and local level. The senators and delegates to the General Assembly from Fairfax County gather each January for a public hearing on issues relevant to the upcoming legislative session. Similarly, the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors holds public comment hearings periodically. In both cases, residents can testify for 3 minutes each on an issue of concern to them. These hearings are a good opportunity because they allow you to address all the elected officials present, even those from outside your district. Here are some tips for participating in a public comment hearing. Find out when the next public comment hearing will be by checking the Fairfax County website. Ideally, get a group together to attend the hearing and have each person register by following the instructions on the county's website. Decide on the issue your group will cover and decide which aspect of the issue each person will address. Prepare your remarks in writing and make sufficient copies for each legislator or supervisor, plus a couple of extra copies for the clerk, and a few more copies for any media present. Practice and time your delivery since you only have 3 minutes for your presentation. Your written materials can be a bit longer and can include attachments, and you can use slides, maps, graphs, videos, etc. in your presentation as long as you can do so within your allotted time. When the hearing begins, the clerk will call the names of the first 2 speakers. The first speaker will come to the lectern while the second one comes and sits up front, ready to speak when the first speaker finishes. When that person finishes, the clerk will then call the names of the second and third speakers and so on. So when your name is called the first time, move to the on-deck chair, bringing the copies of your remarks for the legislators or supervisors and the clerk. When the speaker before you finishes and your name is called again, walk over to the clerk, hand him or her the copies of your remarks, then return to the lectern and begin your remarks. A positive tone and good eye contact will make your presentation more effective. Conclude with your specific ask for the legislators or supervisors. In the unlikely event you get a question from one of the officials present, answer it succinctly, and then you can offer to provide a fuller response later. Following your remarks, you may be approached by the media, in which case you can give the reporter a copy of your remarks and answer any questions that he or she may have. As the Union of Concerned Scientists says, writing a letter to the editor of your local or regional newspaper is an effective and easy way to reach a large audience with your message. LTEs are printed on the editorial page, which is one of the most read pages in the paper. Congressional staffers also tell us that members of Congress keep a close eye on media coverage, including LTEs, in their local papers, so that they can keep a pulse on issues of importance to their constituents. Having a strong letter published helps you reach both a wide public audience and your elected officials with the same effort. Even if your letter is not published, it's important for educating and persuading editors. The more letters they receive on a given topic, the more likely they are to dedicate more time in their newspaper to that issue, both on the editorial page and in news articles. It clearly expresses the issue's importance to the community. So here are some tips for writing an effective LTE. Respond to an article, editorial, or op-ed in the paper. Begin your letter by citing the original piece by name, date, and author. Of course, follow the newspaper's guidance on how to submit an LTE. Include your letter in the body of an email and don't include attachments. Be timely. Respond to an article within 2 to 3 days of its publication. Share your expertise if you have qualifications relevant to the topic you're addressing. Be sure to say that in your letter. Refer to the elected official you're trying to influence by name, which ensures that his or her staff will bring your letter to the editor to the elected official's attention. And keep your letters short, focused, and interesting. In general, letters should be under 200 words, 150 or less is better. Stay focused on one or at most two main points and get to the main point in the first 2 sentences. If possible, include interesting facts, relevant personal experience, and any local connections to the issue. Open your letter by refuting the claim made in the original story that the paper ran, or by agreeing with it if you agree and have additional points you want to offer. Then use the next few sentences to back up your claims and advocate for your position. Try to focus on the positive. Wrap up with your call to action, explaining what you think needs to happen now. If appropriate, point readers to a source for additional information or to engage in action. Be sure to include your name, address, and daytime telephone number so that the newspaper can contact you before printing the letter if they need to. And then if your letter is printed, print or clip it out and send it to your elected official with a brief cover note. So now you know various strategies for advocacy. Where can you get information on specific issues and bills to contact your elected officials about? For advocacy at the federal level, you can visit the USCCB's Take Action page, where you can view current action alerts and sign up for future alerts so you can contact your senators and representatives to express your concerns and opinions on upcoming legislation. For advocacy at the state level, You can visit the Virginia Catholic Conferences Action Center, where you can likewise view current action alerts and sign up for their email network. The VCC represents bishops of Arlington and Richmond in their dioceses in advocacy before the Virginia General Assembly, and they rely on Catholics throughout Virginia to support their efforts by lobbying their respective senators and delegates. There are lots of other Catholic advocacy organizations out there, such as Franciscan Action Network, Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns and Network, and you can sign up at their websites if interested. But the official church sites for us are those of the USCCB and VCC, as well as those of like organizations like Catholic Charities USA, Catholic Climate Covenant, and Catholic Relief Services, which work closely with the USCCB. So thank you for your time and attention. Here's my email address if you'd like to follow up with me on anything.